It was a smudged, faded ad on the laundromat's community board that started it all. Night watchman wanted for Oakhaven Memorial Gardens. No experience necessary. Must be comfortable with solitude. The pay was a number that made my heart skip a beat. An amount that felt like a solution to every quiet, panicked thought I'd been having about rent and bills. It was too good to be true for a job that seemed to be about just sitting in a booth. I called from the parking lot. A man with a voice like grinding gravel answered, worn down by years of what I could only assume was smoke and resignation. He didn't ask for my name, just told me to be at the cemetery office the next day at 10. The office was a small, quiet building that smelled of old wood and lemon polish. Mr. Halloran sat behind a vast, empty desk, an old man swimming in a thick, brown cardigan despite the warm day. He didn't offer a handshake. His pale, watery eyes looked right through me as if he were inspecting my bones. He asked 3 questions. Do you have a car? Are you prone to naps? Can you handle the quiet? After my 3rd yes, he was done. He slid a single, heavy key and a sheet of paper across the desk. This is for the gate and the booth, he said, and this is for you. Read it. Memorize it. Follow it. Do not deviate. His tone was flat and absolute, a command that brooked no argument. The paper held a list of rules in a plain, blocky font. At first, I thought it was a joke, a hazing ritual. Rule 1. Walk a circular patrol path every hour on the hour, taking exactly 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16. Rule 2. Carry the large silver flashlight at all times. If it flickers or dies, return to the booth immediately. Do not run. Do not look behind you. The prickle of unease began then. Rule 3. You may hear your name called from the old sections. Ignore it. It is not for you. Rule 4. If you see a fresh grave without a headstone, place the smooth stone from your pocket on the soil. A new one will be there each night. Do not question this. My eyes flicked up to Halloran's impassive face. He just watched me, waiting. I read on. Rule 5. The shadows by the willow tree sometimes look like people. They are not people. Do not acknowledge them. Rule 6. At 3:03 a.m., a bell will toll 3 times. After the 3rd, close your eyes for 1 full minute. Count to 60. Do not open them, no matter what you hear or feel. A cold knot tightened in my gut. This was too specific, too strange. Rule 7. You are the only living person here after dark. If you see another, retreat to the booth, lock the door, and do not open it for any reason until sunrise. The final rule, Rule 8, was underlined heavily. Under no circumstances are you to enter the white mausoleum with the locked iron door. It is not locked to keep something out. It is locked to keep something in. I looked up, my mouth dry. Halloran's gaze was unwavering. You understand, he said. It wasn't a question. I thought of the money, the number that could erase my worries. I thought of walking away. I folded the paper, the weight of the key solid in my hand. I nodded. The motion felt stiff, foreign, as I stepped out of the quiet office back into the sun. A deep, cold certainty settled inside me. This was no joke. You will close your eyes for a full minute. You will count the seconds in your head. You will not open them until you are sure 60 seconds have passed, no matter what you hear or feel. Rule 7. You are the only living person on these grounds after sundown. If you see another living person, you are to retreat to the booth, lock the door, and not open it for any reason until sunrise. The final rule, Rule 8, was underlined. Under no circumstances are you to enter the white mausoleum with the locked iron door. It is not locked to keep something out. It is locked to keep something in. I looked up from the paper, a half-formed laugh dying in my throat. Mr. Halloran's expression hadn't changed. It was as serious as a heart attack. You understand, he said. It wasn't a question. I just nodded, feeling a strange coldness settle in my stomach. The money. I reminded myself. Just think about the money. The first night was the worst. Every rustle of leaves was a footstep. Every hoot of an owl was a voice calling my name. I stuck to the rules like my life depended on it. Because according to Halloran's grim demeanor, maybe it did, my patrol took exactly 15 minutes, the heavy silver flashlight beam cutting a steady path through the oppressive dark. I heard a whisper from the old section, a hissing sort of sound that coiled around my name. I gripped the flashlight tighter and kept walking, my heart hammering against my ribs. I saw the dark shape of a fresh grave, a raw wound in the earth, and my hand, almost of its own volition, dipped into my pocket. My fingers closed around a cooled, smooth stone. I placed it on the damp soil and walked on, feeling a profound sense of wrongness. I didn't look at the willow tree, though I felt a pressure, a presence, from that direction. At 3:03 a.m., a bell tolled, deep and resonant, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It vibrated in my teeth. After the third toll, I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids felt thicker, heavier than the night around me. I started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, around 30. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, a sensation like cobwebs brushing against my cheek. I kept counting. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. 58, 59, 60. I'd opened my eyes. The night was still again. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The rest of the nights fell into a strange, unsettling rhythm. The rules became my religion, my ritual. The weirdness became my normal. The stone was always in my pocket. I never saw what put it there. The shadows by the willow tree were always there, shifting and coalescing in my peripheral vision. I learned not to look. The bell always tolled, and I always counted with my eyes shut. The cold breath and the whispering grew familiar, almost routine. I started to get comfortable. A dangerous thing in a place like Oakhaven. That was my mistake. It was a Tuesday, I think. The nights all blurred together after a while. I was on my third patrol. The flashlight beam was steady. My footsteps were measured. I was almost back to the booth when I saw him. A man, a living, breathing man, standing near the Gothic angel monument. He was dressed in a cheap suit, and he was crying, not loud sobs, but a quiet, broken weeping that was somehow worse. My blood went cold. Rule 7 screamed in my head. You are the only living person on these grounds. I froze for a second. Then the training, the drilled-in instinct, took over. I turned and walked, not too fast, not running, back towards the booth. I could feel his eyes on my back. I heard his voice, shaky and desperate. Hey, man, please, I need help. I lost my wedding ring, my wife. She's going to kill me, please. I kept walking, my hand tightening on the flashlight. The booth was only 50 feet away. It felt like a mile. The man's footsteps started behind me, a quick, shuffling pace. Hey, I'm talking to you. Are you deaf? I'm a person. For God's sake, help me. I reached the booth, fumbled with the key. My hands were shaking. I got the door open and slammed it shut. Turning the deadbolt with a solid, satisfying thunk, I clicked off the flashlight, plunging the small space into darkness. A moment later, a face appeared at the window, pale and streaked with tears. His eyes were wide, pleading, then they changed. The pleading melted away, replaced by a cold, flat emptiness. He tapped on the glass. Not a frantic bang, but a slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he smiled, a thin, horrid stretch of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. He stayed there for what felt like an hour, just staring in with that dead smile, before he finally turned and walked away, dissolving into the shadows between the headstones. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat there, watching the darkness, waiting for the sun. After that, the cemetery felt different. It was no longer just a place with strange rules. It was a place that was actively hostile. The whispers from the old section became more insistent. They started to sound like words I almost understood. The shadows by the willow tree seemed closer, denser. The minute with my eyes closed at 3:03 a.m. became an ordeal. The cold breath was joined by faint, skittering touches on my arms, like the legs of a large insect. I started having dreams. Not when I slept at home, but small, waking dreams during my patrols. I'd see a figure standing perfectly still behind a tree, only for it to be gone when I looked directly at it. I'd hear the sound of dirt being shifted, like someone was digging, but I could never find the source. The rules were the only thing keeping me sane. The rigid, predictable structure was my anchor in the shifting, wrong reality of the cemetery. I became obsessed with the white mausoleum, the one I was never, ever supposed to enter. It was an old, marble structure, stained with age and greenish moss. The iron door was massive, and it was indeed locked with a heavy, archaic-looking padlock that seemed to absorb the light. "It is locked to keep something in." Halloran's words echoed. What was in there? What could be so bad that it needed its own special rule? My curiosity was a slow-growing poison. It festered during the long, silent hours. I started taking a slightly longer route on my patrol, just to pass by it, to look at that door. I told myself I was just being vigilant, but I was drawn to it. One night, about 3 months in, something changed. It was the night of the new moon, a deep, absolute blackness that felt heavy and suffocating. My patrol felt off from the start. The flashlight beam seemed weaker, barely pushing back the gloom. The whispers were louder, a constant, chattering murmur just at the edge of hearing. As I passed the white mausoleum, I saw it. The iron door was slightly ajar, just a sliver of deeper blackness in the dark marble. My heart stopped. No, it was impossible. That lock was solid. I stood there, frozen, the rules warring with a terrifying, morbid curiosity. Rule 8, do not enter. But the door was open. What if it had gotten out? What was it? I took a step closer, then another, my feet moving almost against my will. The flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it at the crack. I could see nothing inside, just an impenetrable void. I reached out a hand, my fingers hovering an inch from the cold, rough iron, and then I heard it, a sound from within. A soft, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across a stone floor. It was followed by a low, rhythmic sound, a sort of pulsing, gurgling breath. It was the most horrifying sound I had ever heard. It spoke of a biology that was not of this world, of a presence that was ancient and utterly malignant. I stumbled back, my survival instincts finally overwhelming my curiosity. I didn't run, but I walked faster than the rules allowed, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I finished the patrol in 12 minutes, a violation. I sat in the booth, trembling, for the next hour. When the time came for the next patrol, I almost couldn't bring myself to leave the relative safety of the booth. But the rules were clear: walk the path, exactly on the hour. So I went, my entire body tense. I avoided looking at the white mausoleum, but I could feel it there, a cold spot in the night. The door was closed again. The heavy padlock was back in place, as if it had never been open, but the air around it felt different, charged and watchful. The rest of the night was a blur of fear. The 3:03 a.m. bell toll was a welcome relief, a known terror in a sea of unknown ones. When I closed my eyes, the minute of darkness was filled with that same wet, dragging sound, much closer this time. Right outside the booth, I could smell it too, a smell of damp earth, of rotten things, and underneath it all, a coppery scent like old blood. I counted to 60, my body rigid with terror. When I opened my eyes, the smell was gone, but the memory of it was seared into my brain. The next morning, I went to see Mr. Halloran. I had to. I found him in the office, watering a sickly-looking fern. I didn't know how to begin. I just stood there, my hands shoved in my pockets. He looked at me, his watery eyes seeming to take in everything. My pale face, the slight tremor in my hands, the door. I finally managed to say, "The white mausoleum." It was open. Halloran went very still, the watering can poised in mid-air. He slowly put it down. "You did not enter," he said. It was not a question. It was a command, a plea. I shook my head. "No, but I heard something." He nodded, a slow, weary gesture. "It knows your scent now," he said, his voice low. "It is old, and it is patient. It tests the locks. It tests the watchers. You did well not to go in. Going in is how you stop being the watcher and start being part of the garden." He turned back to his fern, The conversation was clearly over. I went home. But I couldn't shake the image of that open door, the sound, the smell. I thought about quitting. I really did. But the money was still good. And a strange, stubborn part of me didn't want to be driven out. I had survived. I had followed the rules. That had to count for something. The following nights were tense. But the mausoleum door remained shut, the lock secure. I started to relax again, thinking maybe it had been a one-time test, a fluke. I was wrong. Last night was the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, which meant the shortest night, but in Oakhaven, it felt like the longest night of my life. Everything was amplified. The whispers were a constant, sibilant chorus. The shadows by the willow tree were so dense they looked almost solid. I saw the man in the cheap suit again. This time he was just standing at the edge of the path, smiling that dead smile, holding up a hand as if in greeting. I ignored him and walked on, my skin crawling. At 2 a.m., I found 2 fresh graves without headstones, right next to each other. I placed the 2 stones from my pocket, my mind racing. This was new. It had never been more than one before. The air grew cold, a deep, penetrating chill that had nothing to do with the weather. My flashlight beam began to flicker, a slow, ominous pulse. Rule 2. If the light flickers or dies, return to the booth immediately. I turned and started back. My pace measured but urgent. The flickering got worse, casting stuttering, jumpy images of the graves and statues around me in one of those frozen flashes. The world did not snap back to normal when I opened my eyes. It seeped back in, slow and grudging. The first thing that returned was the smell, not the overwhelming stench of the grave, but the familiar, dusty aroma of the old booth, of stale coffee and damp wood. It was a mundane scent, but it felt like a lie, a thin veneer painted over the reality of what had just happened. The crushing pressure was gone, but the memory of it was a physical weight on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. I remained on the floor, my spine pressed hard against the unyielding wood of the door, my arms wrapped around my knees, which were pulled tight to my chin. I was a child hiding from a monster, and the rational part of my brain, the part that knew I was a grown man, had long since been shouted down by the primal, terrified animal cowering in the dark. I could feel the frantic, panicked hammering of my heart against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of pure fear. It took a long time for it to settle into a slower, heavier rhythm, a dull, exhausted thud that seemed to echo in the hollow of my chest. The cold spots on my skin, the places where that deliberate, rhythmic tapping had bloomed into patches of deep, penetrating chill, were only now beginning to fade. They didn't warm up so much as the memory of the cold simply receded, leaving behind a phantom numbness, a ghost of a touch that had never truly been physical. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just sat there and listened. The silence in the booth was no longer absolute. It was a fragile, tentative thing, and I was waiting for it to break. When the old floorboard under the desk creaked, a sound I had heard 100 times. I flinched so hard my shoulder slammed into the door. My head snapped up, eyes wide, expecting to see the glass of the window shatter inwards or the doorknob to start jiggling. But there was nothing, just the settling of an old building. A few minutes later, the small, grimy refrigerator in the corner shuddered and kicked on with a low, rattling grumble. The sound was so normal, so utterly domestic, that it felt like a personal insult, a cruel joke. How could this simple machine just hum along after what had just transpired? After that voice had spoken my name, my real name, the one buried in childhood. It was a sound from a different world, a world of kitchens and morning routines, a world that felt a million miles away from this tiny, besieged outpost on the edge of nothingness. I watched the window. The square of pure blackness began to change, not with light, but with a subtle lessening of the dark. The absolute void softened at its edges, bleeding into a deep, bruised purple, the color of a healing wound. This then shifted, with infinite slowness, into a pale, sickly gray, the color of a corpse's skin. It was not the hopeful dawn of storybooks. It was a weary, reluctant surrender of the night, offering no comfort, only a temporary reprieve. It was the sky admitting it could not hold onto the darkness forever. Not yet. When the first true sliver of sun finally appeared, a thin, razor-sharp line of brilliant, impossible gold on the horizon, it felt less like a victory and more like a stay of execution. It painted the very tops of the tallest obelisks and angels, turning their stone features into stark, black silhouettes against the growing light. I watched it for a long time, until the gray was beaten back into a proper morning blue, and the gold spilled down, touching the grass, illuminating the headstones, making the dew glisten like a million scattered diamonds. It was beautiful, and I felt nothing but a profound, bone-deep weariness and a cold certainty that the beauty was a mask. I finally, slowly, uncurled my stiff limbs, every joint protesting, my muscles aching as if I had run for miles. I pushed myself up from the floor, my legs feeling weak and unsteady. My hand went to the doorknob, but I hesitated, my fingers hovering just above the cold brass. Was it really over? Was it safe? I took a deep, shuddering breath, turned the lock, and pulled the door open. The morning air was cool and clean, smelling of grass and damp earth. It was a relief, but it was a relief I couldn't trust. I stepped out, my shoes crunching on the gravel path. The cemetery was postcard perfect, peaceful, serene. Birds were singing their morning songs. A squirrel chattered from a nearby oak tree. Everything was exactly as it should be. And it was all wrong. I knew better now. I knew what lay beneath the surface, what waited in the shadows when the sun was gone. I began to walk, not towards the gate and the promise of my car and my bed, but deeper into the garden of stones. My feet carried me on a path I didn't consciously choose, past the weeping angel, past the old sections with their whispering energies. My destination was inevitable. I found myself standing once again before the white mausoleum. It looked as it always did in the daylight. An old, stained marble structure, silent and imposing. The iron door was shut. The heavy, archaic padlock was firmly in place, looking as solid and unmovable as the earth itself. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was amiss. It was a picture of finality, of sealed permanence. But then my eyes, dragged downward as if by a magnetic pull, saw it. There, on the worn stone step at the base of the door, lay a single, small, smooth stone. It was the same kind of stone I placed on the fresh graves, the same kind that appeared in my pocket each night. It shouldn't have been there, not in the morning, not here. I knelt down, my knees pressing into the cold, damp ground. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and picked it up. It was ice cold, a deep, unnatural cold that seeped into my skin and seemed to travel up my arm. And there, running clean through its center, was a crack, a perfect, precise fracture that split the stone in two. It wasn't a random break. It looked deliberate. A message, a verdict. I held the two halves in my palm, the cold a constant, aching reminder. It was the stone I should have found in my pocket this morning, my payment, my tool, my ward, and it was broken. I closed my fingers around the pieces, the sharp edges digging into my flesh. I'm writing this now because I have to go back tonight. The money is still good. It has to be good enough, and a part of me. A part I don't fully understand and am deeply afraid of. Needs to know what happens next. The rules are all I have. They are my shield, my prayer, my only map through the dark. I just have to make sure I never, ever open that door.